I played this game 6 times for this video. Granted, part of that was me being a careless idiot, but I had to play it 6 times. The same, repetitive game, 6 times, for footage sake. And because of that, I am never playing this fucking game again. We are off to a great start! Nintendo's next system was on the horizon, and after the success of Island, it only seemed fitting for Nintendo to make a follow-up with their next-generation hardware, which would feature revolutionary 3D graphics and take the world by storm. Bitch, the PS1 was already out at this time. I never understood why people would say that N64 revolutionized 3D graphics when fucking Jumping Flash came out in 1995. Eat your heart out, Mario 64. Sorry, I let my childhood beast out there for a second. I don't need to be that guy again. In 1996, the next Yoshi game was unveiled to the public at Space World 96, originally titled Yoshi's Island 64, because it was mandatory that practically every first-party game for the system had to have the number 64 in the title. Eventually, the game was renamed to Yoshi's Story, and like I said a while ago, this was my first home console Yoshi game, because it was one of the first and admittedly only virtual console games I bought on the Wii Shop channel. Now, up to this point, high expectations were set. People adored Yoshi's Island, so there was every little hope that the follow-up would be just as good. Was. The plot is that the Yoshis are living joyous lives, can't blame them now that this piece of shit is gone, until Baby Bowser shows up, steals their so-called Super Happy Tree, and turns the entire island into a pop-up book. And for some reason, the absence of the trees causes the Yoshis to drift into severe depression. Over a tree. That is, until 6 baby Yoshis hatch conveniently at the right time and decide to venture off to retrieve the Super Happy Tree from Baby Bowser's clutches. And that's it. So much for a game called Yoshi's Story, eh?
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
Now that I think about it, why do the Yoshis need the tree when there's fruit literally everywhere? Are these secretly drugs? And by selecting story mode, we're instantly off on our quest. Well, we gotta pick our major hero first. Of course it's red, it represents my bravery to do this video. Every time you start a new level, you can choose between one of 6 Yoshis, who of which have their own favourite fruits closely representing their colours. So the green one loves watermelons, red loves apples, yellow loves bananas, etc. However, you can unlock 2 more Yoshi colours in certain levels, white and oh fuck no. All the Yoshis pretty much play the same, and like I said, they have their own favourite fruits and whatnot. But the white and black Yoshis will love anything they eat, including peppers, and their eggs can do a lot of damage. They aren't playable in time trial mode, however, but I'll get into that later. The Yoshis also act as your life system, because if you die as a particular Yoshi, it'll be taken straight to Bowser's castle, unless you can get a white Shy Guy to revive it. So you better make sure your Yoshis are in good shape, or it's straight to the dungeon for them. As far as controls are concerned, they're pretty much identical to the first one, but with a few minor changes that make them a little worse. You can still run, jump, flutter jump, and of course eat up enemies and throw them. This time though, you can't spit enemies back out as a Yoshi will automatically swallow them, and the egg throwing is more precision based than before. It breaks the pace a little bit since I always preferred the movable but accurate throwing from the first game, but I got used to it after a while. What I can't get used to, however, are the actual movements of Yoshi. Seeing as this is a 2D platformer, it would only make sense to give the player the option to use the D-pad. After all, most people, including myself, tend to use the D-pad to make more accurate movements in 2D platformers. Except for whatever reason, in Yoshi's Story, you can only use the joystick. Unless you're playing on an emulator, there's absolutely 0 ways to use the D-pad in a 2D platformer. I know this is more of a preference thing, but do you think anyone would want to play a game with a stubby little joystick? Playing it on Virtual Console is a little better, but it's baffling there's no option to use the D-pad, especially when it adds on to the fact that Yoshi feels really slippery. Maybe it's just me, but Yoshi feels a lot more floaty. Every time I jump, it felt like Yoshi kept carrying that momentum forward, and it comes to a screeching halt every time you flutter jump. There were many instances where I could have made more precise jumps, but the floaty physics made them an impossibility. It's the worst when I'm over bottomless pits, since any easy mistake will result in your death. There are 6 worlds like Yoshi's Island, but this time each world only has 4, and during a playthrough, only 1 level from each world can be played. complete, totaling up to 6 levels on each playthrough. But if you want to see all the levels the game has to offer, then you're gonna have to play through the story mode a minimum of at least 4 times, sometimes more if you don't know what you're doing. In the first world, you have access to all 4 levels by default, but in order to unlock more levels in other worlds, you have to find 3 giant hearts. This was something I was completely unaware of as a kid, since I would play the game dozens of times and had no idea this was what they did. I thought they'd just restore your health, but that was far from the case. In order for you to advance to the next level, you need to eat at least 30 fruit, and depending on which fruit you eat, means the amount of points you get can vary. Yet in spite of that, the game really wants you to explore these levels and see what they have to offer. The thing is though, the game is extremely forgiving in terms of difficulty. Judging by its art style, or even the design of the front of the box, Yoshi's Story seems to be aiming at a much younger demographic than those of Yoshi's Island. I'm sure kids will have a blast playing this, and it meets those requirements a lot more than other weird baby games out there, so I guess that means the game's not entirely for me. Yet because of that, I never really found myself wanting to explore these levels because it breezed by so quickly that it honestly made it boring. Every time I play this game, I feel compelled to just eat 30 fruit as quickly as possible, because I didn't want to risk dying due to poor momentum and just wasn't feeling it with the levels at all. It also doesn't help that they introduce pointless mechanics to spice things up, but they just murdered the pacing, and add to the existing issue of the game feeling really boring to play. Not to mention there's parts in some levels where you're just slowly crawling along before getting to more fruit. I don't want to act like the game doesn't have effort put into it, because it clearly does. And there are still those fun and even chill moments that can make the game feel really satisfying and relaxing to play. Honestly, I have to admire the fact that you can play a different level on each playthrough. Spicing up the way you play can really make a difference. But another area people love to dive into for playing the game is getting all of the melons, and speedrunners love to do this especially. I can't exactly comment since I'm not a speedrunner myself, but I can't act like I'm surprised. The melons seem to give the Yoshi some advantages like invincibility, so I guess they have some value outside of speedrunning, because aside from tallying up the score you have towards the end, there's not really much incentive to collect them either. The visuals themselves are 50-50 for me. It looks cute, and the enemy redesigns fit the art style well enough, but I feel like it wasn't pushing the N64 to its limits. That's not always a bad thing, but I feel like if this game was tweaked just a little bit, it could have actually fit on the Super Nintendo. It's colourful, expressive, and diverse enough, which is why I'm sort of split on it. I really wish the game didn't rely heavily on 2D sprites, because you can imagine how fuzzy they'd look on modern TVs. Maybe you'd get a better experience if you played on a CRT, but I digress. The Yoshis themselves look adorable though. In fact, I think this was the foundation for the Yoshi redesign we'd all know to this very day. It's also the first game where Kazumi Tataka provided the voice of Yoshi as well, although not the first time he even had a voice.
Cause here comes Yoshi.
What the fuck is a meep? The soundtrack, on the other hand, no 50-50 for me, chief. The soundtrack fucking slaps. Sure, most of the songs are just remixes of the main melody, but shit man, these are some damn good beats. A lot of them stuck in my head throughout my playthroughs, and as I was writing the script for this review, I was actually listening to it. Although that's just the instrumental scores. As far as the Yoshi songs are concerned, I get they're trying to go for that cute, fluffy vibe that kids' games would naturally flow with, but this isn't the way to do it. It's too squeaky and loud to be seen as anything other than obnoxious. The boss fights are an absolute joke, and take no less than half a minute to beat. One just amounts to you eating it until it's gone, another turns invisible and it's ridiculously easy to locate where it is, one just has you waiting to hit its blind spot, and another you just throw eggs at its lips and that's it. Oh, and the invisible ghost boss is even easier on the Switch version because of an emulation bug. The final boss has you go against Baby Bowser, who just barks at you, and the fight constantly gives you hearts and fruits to fight him, so the stakes aren't even that high to begin with. Oh, and another thing, the eggs can also damage Bowser, even though they're expecting you to hit the spikes on the ceiling. After all of that, you get your super happy tree back, and the Yoshis live happily ever after. So much for a grand story. Yoshi's Story is a rather divisive game in the year 2022. People will either love it or hate it, but predictable me finds myself sitting in the middle. It's not a bad game. I did enjoy myself when it started out, but over time I found myself getting bored with the uneventful level design and boring gameplay mechanics. The key word you might have noticed I'm using throughout this video is incentive. It culminates into a game where I'm not satisfied playing it and I'm not motivated to go any further, because Yoshi's Story is just just that boring to me. You might say it's not fair to critique a game I didn't fully play through, but given the game's ridiculously short story, I don't think I'm missing much. I've played every level before on video files I accidentally deleted, but not this time. I was that bored. It certainly has its moments, but isn't quite high enough to be on the same level as the last game. I guess if you're a really young kid who wants to jump around as Yoshi and sing to some music, you'll definitely get your kicks with Yoshi's story. But if you want something a little bit more out there and fun to play through time and time again, you're much better off with the first game.
Cause here comes Yoshi, and he's up against Goombas, Groovers, Pooh Buddies, and Piranha Plants in Nintendo's new stack and sandwich puzzle game called Yoshi. Match the creatures and wipe them out. Play alone or with a friend, but mix them and you won't stand a chance. It's challenging, it's overwhelming.
Hey, Yoshi!
It's Yoshi!
Liar!